Hello, it's time once again for Catalog and Cocktails. It's your honest, no BS, non salesy conversation about enterprise data management with tasty beverages in hand. I'm Tim Gasper, longtime data nerd and product guy at Data.World, joined by Juan Cicada. Hey, Juan.
Hey, Tim, how are you doing? It is now time for Take a Break, and let's go talk about data. And today, especially, we're going to talk more about AI. And I am super incredibly excited to have a guest, which I think nobody in our data space probably knows about or hears about, but I just wanted to have an opportunity to get out of our bubble. Today, our guest is Alexander Torrenegra, who is the CEO of Torre.ai, and also he is the techie shark of Shark Tank, Colombia, and Mexico. And one of the reasons why I'm super excited to have Alexander on is because as a techie shark, he's really working on building companies doing AI and built from the ground up. Torre.ai is a job matching company. They're using AI. So how about we kind of go to the other side and learn from the people who are actually building these companies and using data, and AI is there from the beginning and all the conversations we did have, yada, yada, yada. But before we get into there, Alexander, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Excited to be here with you guys talking about what I like most, which is product, AI, and data. As you mentioned in a sales conversation, I'm a techie, not only shark, I'm a techie CEO. So I don't like pitching to investors. I don't like pitching sales. What I like to do is talk about product and data and how to use data.
Awesome. But before we get into that, let's quick tell and toast. So what are we drinking and what are we toasting for today? What are you drinking, Alexander?
I'm having single malt, Japanese single malt infused, very smoky, but on top, because I like smoky flavors, infused with smoked matcha green tea as well. So it doesn't get smokier than this.
Oh, I got to get that. I'm a big peaty single malt Isla. I mean, Lafroig is the minimum for me. Everything goes above that. So I got to figure that one out.
So
have you had Japanese ones?
I have Japanese whiskey, but not smoky like what you're describing. So
usually the Japanese whiskeys are lighter, right? And so that yours sounds very intense.
Oh yeah, it's quite.
All right.
That's why I only have less than a finger tall.
Tim, how about you? What are you drinking today?
I am drinking a blackberry. So I have some blackberry and sage syrup, and so I added some Empress Indigo gin to it, a little bit of a lemon, and just some soda. Topped it off with a little soda. So pretty tasty.
And I'm breaking, I think, confirmed with Tim, I think, is that this is the first time I'm having a cocktail. I'm actually bringing wine. And I just finished, I was having wine before. This is a Mexican wine. It's a Gina Sommelier, and it is a Tempranillo Grenache Malbec. Mexican wine. People are interested.
That was for breakfast today. Good for you, man.
Yeah. But anyways, so cheers. What do you want to toast? Let's toast to AI and product and being techie and not being salesy.
There we go. Cheers. Honest, no BS, non-salesy.
All right, we're going to dive in here. Alexander, as I was mentioning, you are somebody who's been building companies and building things with AI from the beginning. Let's just kick it off. Like, what's your experience right now when it comes to combining data and AI and the state of things and how we should be managing and governing all this stuff?
So my exposure to AI and data started in 2007. That's 4 years after we created our first startup. Co-founded that with my wife, Voice123. And Voice123 was a marketplace, is a marketplace for casting voice actors. And so those voices that you get to listen to on radio, TV, movies, video games, etc., etc. A lot of AI happening on that market today, as you can imagine. But we created a marketplace, and it exploded in popularity. And as it exploded in popularity, we saw cases where clients were posting casting calls, getting more than 1,000 auditions. And that's impressive for a company, but it's actually bad for the marketplace, because you can imagine that if you get 1,000 auditions and you're the producer, it is going to take you 2 days to listen to all of those to identify the best person. And for the voice actors was also bad, because that meant that you needed to submit 1,000 auditions in average to be able to get one job. So the math doesn't work in the long term, and we knew that for the success of the company, we needed to become curators. From being an open for all marketplace, we needed to curate some of that, and that's when we first decided to let's automate the work of the casting director. And this is 2007, so people say like, yeah, right, that's very subjective, you're not going to be able to do it, etc., etc. Well, we'll try. It took 2 years, but at the end of the day, we created a system that automatically identified the best, the most likely voice actors that will be really good matches for a given casting call, and those will be the ones prioritized to be invited to audition for that. And what's fascinating is that initially we invested some time like trying to identify similar voices and how these different sound waves and frequencies and whatever it is that we needed to look at. But we ended up figuring out that the best predictor was actually the behavior of the voice actor in comparison to the producer inside of the marketplace. So a purely data-driven kind of recommender system that Amazon uses. That was the best way of predicting if a person was going to be good for a job. We didn't have to listen to the voice of the person or analyze the voice. We simply needed to look at the behavior of the person in the platform, in the system, to be able to predict whether they were going to be good or not on that
like
regard.
what,
So
what
that
they're
was
clicking and what they're doing, like that kind of behavior.
yes, and what projects they are looking at, and what ratings they are getting from certain types of producers, and what those producers are also liking. So finding a lot of correlations on that regard. So that was my first exposure to, okay, let's analyze this. Just the more data we get, the better we become at predicting and applying a bunch of different machine learning models and such, which was very leading edge back in the day. But that's what helped me realize, well, with enough data and quality data and good enough models, we are going to be able to replicate the work of intermediaries. That's what we ended up doing then on my second company, Bonnie Studio, which Bonnie Studio is, in one sentence, is a high volume production house of creative content. So if you have you have listened to an ad in Spotify, there is a high chance that ad was created by Bonnie Studio. And what Bonnie Studio does is it gets a bunch of projects from clients that require a lot of volume for creative work, and then it assembles in real time a team of people and AI that works together on creating that creative piece and delivers that creative piece back to the client. So again, lots of data. The more data we have, the better we become at. And by the way, we needed to be even more assertive, because in Bonnie Studio, we get the project and we don't give 10 options back to the client. No, we have to pick who's the person that is going to be doing the job, like Uber kind of thing, but for creative work, which is more subjective. But the more data we capture, the better we became at doing this, and now we have success rates over 99%, meaning 99% of the time we can guess what the client would actually like, and that's what we deliver to the client. So that was my second stint in this, and well, now the next one is what I'm working on right now, Torre.ai, where we are fully automating recruitment. And how does that look like? Well, an AI agent, Emma, that is a recruiter that is fully autonomous, but is purely AI. And she does everything that a really good recruiter does, but significantly faster. And I would argue, and that's a long thread, but in a non-discriminatory way. So we actually took care of making sure that she wouldn't discriminate, not only consciously, but also unconsciously, the way that many recruiters end up doing. So for that, even more data. Because we had to analyze around three different types of data points for Voice 123, and around 10 different types of data points for Bonnie Studio. For Torre, it's over 1,000 data points in around 100 different categories to be able to make predictions in terms of which candidate is going to be good, not only for a job opening, but also for a company, for a team, and for a given leader in particular.
Okay, so what I find fascinating is that all the uses of like machine learning AI you've been doing across the different companies, and now the biggest one, which I think is like the topic that people may be so afraid about right now, right, is eliminating. I mean, you're helping people find jobs, but at the same time you're eliminating some jobs, and then using AI for all of this. And I think the topic that comes up for us is all this governance and the guardrails around this. Like, how is this being managed? Like, when you start your organization, you start your company, how do you start? Are you, first of all, starting with like a very governance mindset first, or is that comes after? Like, what are the recommendations that you would be giving? Because I want you, but I want you to push this also kind of for people who are listening is they're thinking about bringing AI to their organizations, and they want to be doing like, how afraid should I be of doing this, or should I be more kind of open and finding that balance of being closed-minded or more open-minded?
So from the get-go, we and thankfully, my experience in the previous two companies allowed me to foresee some of the challenges we're going to have in reference to data management in this one. And in fact, because we thought of governance, we figured, oh, that's yet another competitive advantage we are going to have, because we are going to design our system, we are going to design our data management in a way that is going to make it more competitive and even impossible for some of the existing players to actually compete with us. So to give you an example, the go-to-market product. So now that we have this, Emma, this AI agent, we are offering it to companies in two different ways. But one of the ways is you can license the technology for you to handle your candidates. You bring your candidates from whatever sources you have, but Emma handles all of the candidates for you. Now, while that's cool and that's important, data is the new oil. And we know that the technology that we created is cool, is leading edge, but eventually someone else is going to be able to copy it. So what we are investing on is on capturing data. We are planning, we are working on becoming a new, hopefully the new job network, and that job network, the value of the network is the data, is not the technology on top of that data. So every client that uses our technology, one of the things they have to agree to is to share with a common network of candidates, a common data pool, all of the candidates that they opt to rule out or that they end up ignoring. And there are multiple reasons for that. Not only that we want the data and we want to build a job network, it's also for the experience of the candidate. One of the things that people hate the most when they apply, there is this stat that I find fascinating. The top two things that adults hate the most doing, it's washing their clothes, A, and B, looking for new jobs. Like that's how bad the experience is for candidates. And one of the reasons is because they have to, every time they apply to a job, and this happens particularly in the US, they have to fill a lot of answers, provide a lot of answers that in the previous application they already provided. Right? And I'm sure that if anyone here listening has applied to a job, they know that they applied to a job and then they ask a lot of questions and they submit the resume and then they ask a lot of questions that are in the resume as well. But now every time you apply for a new job, now, if you have an AI agent doing that, and every time you talk to that AI agent is asking you once again for your resume, and once again is asking you those questions, how do you think your relationship with that AI agent is going to be? You're going to hate her or hate him, right? Like, you already know this. So it's very important from the get-go that whatever data this AI agent captures can be memorized by the AI agent to avoid that the agent for asking that question again to the same candidate, even if the candidate is applying to another job in another company. So that data sharing becomes extremely critical, that governance of the data. So you as the candidate, when you apply, you're acknowledging that the data is not only going to the company, but you're acknowledging that the data can be used if you apply to other jobs to save you time as well. And also to help you identify new jobs that might be a good match for you if you end up not being hired for the job opening that you applied, which that's the case 90+% of the cases. But that means having a data governance structure of sorts where everyone is happy with the outcome, that the candidate is happy with having the data there, that the candidate can control the data, that the company knows that they own access to the data, but they actually don't own the data. And of course, you have to build all of the GDPR compliance on top of this, etc., etc. So now I started answering the question. Sorry for the long answer, but I started answering the question comparing that you can license our technology. Well, that's what many companies call an ATS, an applicant tracking system. But if you look at all of the other ATSs in the market, all of them sell you the idea, and it's good for them, that the data of the candidates is yours and is yours to keep. So that's why Workday, for example, hopefully they are not that client of yours, because I'm not going to like this comment, but Workday, it's the most common ATS out there, but it's the one that causes the most frustration for candidates because it's the one that for every single application, for every different client that they have, they ask you the same questions that you already answered in forms that look very similar to the questions that you just answered 5 minutes ago, just for a different job in a different company, right? So, and because they started with that kind of governance structure and data and agreements, it's going to be impossible for them to change to something, well, not impossible, but significantly very difficult for them to change into something that looks more like a network and an AI agent that is friendly rather than what they offer.
I find it very fascinating that you've found a way to be careful with data and to do good governance around data and turn that into something that actually creates a better user experience for the users. Because I think a lot of times, right, when people think about governance, and this is a little bit different because for you, you're building a product, for others, sometimes they, work at an insurance company and insurance is the product, but data is not necessarily, it's another aspect, right? But like a lot of times people always think about governance as not something that can be beneficial to the user experience. It's only something that makes things worse. But it seems like you found a way to really make it a differentiation and actually make it better for the users.
Yep, and for both sides, right? So because of course the candidate is happier because they don't have to answer more questions, and now Emma can proactively reach out to them. But also for the company, because now the company can tell and this is how we sell it. This is how we explain it. The company, what we do is we reach out to the candidate saying, "Hey, company X, we know that company X ruled you out for this role, but they're asking us to use all of the information that you provided, if you're okay with it, to help you find other job openings, so that it's kind of free outplacement for you. So it's good branding for the company as well. No, I think that in general, it's not that people want to don't want anyone else to know about them. Is what they want to know is who's using my data and for what, right?
Yeah.
Are they trying to sell me something that I don't want to buy? But if the use case is positive, hey, this company is trying to find me a job that might be beneficial for me, that might help me grow my professional career, by all means, use it. And we are seeing a lot of that with AI, right? Like, hey, if my AI agent is going to be able to give me better answers, like by all means, like analyze all of the emails that I have in my inbox or whatever it is on my iMessage or stuff like that. So it's more about transparency and control rather than secrecy. Not for everyone, but for many people.
Transparency and control were actually exactly the words I was thinking in my head, and then you said it out loud. And then the third piece maybe being, value, right? That in exchange for that information, that they're getting something valuable in return.
So what I'm taking away here is that, and I wrote this down to the Tim, is like governance. The way how you're describing it is like governance is actually going to be even more and more important with all these AI agents, because if these agents, they're personal agents, and it's my agent, right? Then it's I need to be able to understand what data I'm giving it, what data it's going to know, and how it's going to be sharing. So I need to know, I need to define my own personal framework of what I allow when I like. In a way, makes me even think about like what are my own values and what do I care about around that stuff. So anyway, that's something that's making me realize like that governance is going to be much a bigger topic, but in reality, is that something that is that easy? Is that going to happen easily? My example is we now have all this cookie stuff, and it's like accept everything, and some people just say accept all, deny. People don't even know what's going on. They'll either I just want to go see the website, and they just click accept, and they won't even realize what they're getting into. So how much of this are we like pushing the expectations for the users? Like, hey, your governance, but they're like, I don't, this shit's too complicated for me. I'm just going to click all. And then they're like, without even realizing, you just gave all my data away and whatever. Like, what are your thoughts around this?
I think that most people don't give a shit about it. Honestly, most people don't care. So the first.
So hold on. So that means that if most people don't care, then governance is not going to be an important thing.
I think that it's going to be important, and I mean we see Europe has done some interesting work on that regard, as you guys know pretty well. There are some states in the U.S., at least on data and recruitment side, that are doing something interesting. Some that are really like fucking up. Sorry if you have to believe me there, but like really doing stuff that doesn't make sense. So there are important for a sub-segment of people, and but for the most part, people don't care. So the first thing that I did for this project was actually write a white paper on a decentralized, blockchain-based, decentralized professional reputation network that would enable people to own the reputation and take it anywhere, so that they are actually the owners of it, their profile. And unfortunately, crickets. It's the few people that paid attention to that, they were asking questions about, hey, how can I use the token of this protocol to be able to make money, right? Rather than how can I use this actually to help people own their professional reputation and use it for leverage. So most people. My belief is that they don't care. I think that this is more a matter of national security, like what we are seeing with data management and such. And I think that's right. Like national security, what happened with TikTok, we need to be, as societies, we need to be mindful of who has access to the data and the behavior of our people. But it's more because as a group, we need that rather than individuals. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. And maybe the only other thing being like a PR fiasco, right? Like if you have some kind of a leak, or, it becomes known that, they use discrimination or bias in their data, then that can be a bad news article. But at the individual level, a lot of times people are just mashing the accept button, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, so
go ahead, Juan. Yeah.
No, connecting then this kind of back to the enterprise and people doing it kind of in our world of data governance and people that are talking about AI governance, it does then kind of map to, we should have some centralized kind of minimal governance frameworks that we're like basically mandating things, versus you're going to have individual governance frameworks that are coming up from the bottoms up. So I am wondering, like, how much of this with AI, people bringing in AI within the organization, how is this governance going to change? Because we talk about data governance, but then there's like all this also in our world, like AI governance. I'm like, is this just going to be the same thing, or is there like some fundamental change that's going to happen? And it seems like it's just going to be an extension of what we're doing already. There isn't going to be a fundamental change or something.
No, I think it is going to be an extension. We are recording this on the Monday where DeepSeek is like making the stocks of AI-related companies come crashing down in the US, right? So I think that everything related to AI is going to be more commoditized, and regulation in terms of who can develop AI and such, like we are seeing today, it's impossible to control, right? Which is what the previous government in the US was trying to do. So more and more it goes down to data. Like data is the goal. Is what's difficult to commoditize. The models, AI is going to be way more easy to commoditize and get them cheap. But who owns the data is the challenge. And those are the government frameworks and things that we have been seeing during the last decade or so. So it's, as you mentioned, it's just an extension of what we've seen.
So what are your recommendations for folks listening to saying, hey, these are kind of the basic next steps that you should be doing? First of all, like, what are the things that you expect that people should be doing, and what are the next things that you're probably not doing that are like the low-hanging fruit, the next thing to keep you going?
So I can provide some practical advice in some matters, and also provide more of a global perspective, not only US centric. as you go, because our tool is deployed in the, like, American companies can use it, but also it's in Spanish. So we are seeing clients in Latin America as well for our tool, and there is very little legislation and about this topic in most Latin American economies. For example, most developing economies, you can do whatever you want to do with the data. So that's not necessarily good, right? But the point is there are a lot of markets where you can do a lot of things without having to worry about this. Most of the compliance, you have to pay attention to what's happening in the US and, of course, GDPR. The other thing is that, as tough as GDPR is, one of the ways that we have been able to handle that is setting the right expectations. So 20 years ago, you might remember, well, not 20 years ago, 25 years ago, no one gave their real name publicly on the web. And Facebook was the first major network that forced you to use your actual real name. And for many people, that came as a shock. And many people opted not to use Facebook early on because I'm not giving my name out in the web. I don't know what's going to happen with that. And now today, like, everyone and their grandma has a LinkedIn profile. Well, not, they only have like 1/5 of the population there. But anyway, now it's very common for that to happen. So one of the things that we do in Torre is, as the user, when you use Torre, you're acknowledging that by default your data is public, the same way that your LinkedIn profile is public and such. So by setting that level of expectation, it makes it easier to handle all of the backend, because then default public, yes, you can make it private, but by default it's public. So that solves a lot of headaches on the GDPR side of the spectrum, for example. And what's interesting is that most people don't care. Most people don't mind. In fact, one thing that we are doing in the company is, if you apply as a candidate, you can opt to leave your application public for other candidates to see. So that if you do that, then you can see also those other candidates that applied. So you can compare yourself against other candidates. And again, that sounds like it's crazy, but guess what? 4 out of 5 candidates say, yeah, I want that. 4 out of 5 candidates don't mind making public the fact that they are pursuing that given job. And that not only brings transparency, but it brings engagement as well. So that's kind of the very pragmatic approach. Like, don't think that privacy needs to be the default. Many people don't care about that, and actually many people actually want the opposite. They want transparency.
I think that's fascinating. Just really quick question on that is have you had conversations internally about, like, is this hurting our adoption? Like, actually, the public approach, like, if we like were private by default, would that improve adoption? Did you ever have that conversation?
It's the opposite, because candidates love that. They love the engagement, because it might be, in many cases, it's particular to our industry, right? We are not on the advertising sector or stuff like that has gotten so much bad publicity about it. It's actually the opposite. Recruiting is like, when you apply to a job, 90+% of the time is sending your resume into a black hole. You have no idea what happens. You don't get feedback or anything like that. It's frustrating for a lot of people. So actually, they love the idea of transparency. They love the idea of knowing who they are competing against, because it gives them feedback. It allows them to be better. So it has helped a lot on the engagement side, and it motivates people to apply more and more. In fact, there are many people, we started to identify this behavior recently, that they are not looking for a new job. They're not even applying, but they do want to see, if they were to apply, how they would rank for a given job, because it helps them have an idea of how well positioned they are and what kind of job openings they could pursue if they wanted to pursue new job openings.
This is a fantastic way of seeing this, and I think is because we think about, like, the protection all the time, but we're not kind of flipping the script and realize, no, you can, if you look at it as transparency, like, all these other good things can happen. I think by default, we always assume that people they're expecting bad things to happen and they want to protect themselves. And I don't know, is this a very European mindset that we're kind of living through? And in reality, is it more of an American mindset that is like on the other side saying, no, it's fine. Like, look, there's what you just said, like, I'm not looking for a job, but hey, I want to know how, if I were to be looking for a job, how well I'm doing. Like, oh, I'm better than my peers. I'm happy. I'm going to use that to kind of even use that internally to get improve my comp or something, right? Is this, how much of this is like this mentality of having more governance and being more private stuff is back a more European thing or a geopolitical situation or something else?
So, I think that from the consumer side, which will be the equivalent of the candidates in our platform, is pretty much the same all over the place. And so here is an insight. In the US, companies don't give feedback to candidates that are ruled out in terms of why they were ruled out. In general, because they want to avoid being sued. Oops, sorry. What happened with my lighting? But in general, they don't provide feedback because they want to reduce their liability. In developing economies, you tend to have a higher ratio of applicants per job opening. So they don't provide feedback because they just have too many applicants. And so it's way too many people to go one by one, and you have to be more systematic about determining who you want to move to the next stage or not. But the outcome is the same. As the candidate, you're not getting any type of feedback. So we've seen similar behaviors all over the place. On the company side, it's significantly different, right? Companies in the US in particular are way more careful in terms of what's happening with the data. They get attorneys involved reviewing the terms of service. Where is the data being collected? How is the data being handled? Some companies opt not to show candidates how they compare to other candidates. Like we have an opt-out version for the company as well. And they know that that's likely going to decrease the engagement from candidates. But they prefer not to show that to reduce the chances of any potential problem. On the other hand, in developing economies, they love it. They dig it, right? Because they are frustrated that they cannot give feedback to candidates. They are frustrated that candidates complain because they don't get any type of feedback. And because most of the software for recruitment actually comes from the US, those tools, those items are usually not there to be able to easily provide feedback for candidates. So we do have that in place. So companies are adopting this faster. And by the way, they're not afraid of lawsuits because, for good and for bad, that kind of liability is pretty much not exist. I mean, it does exist, but it doesn't get too far anyway. So they are not afraid of that.
Now, this opens up the question now, really, what something I even thinking about is how the AI and all this governance and data governance stuff evolves or changes across in developing countries, right? So, and then you're bringing in this mindset from the Americas, from the Europes into the developing countries, but they're like, that's not what they want, or they're open to more transparency and stuff as you were describing. So I just wonder how will they be able to keep that same spirit of we want more of this stuff because we want to get more feedback, or they're going to eventually start adopting the way how the Americans and Europeans think about it because the software is designed by them and it has to be this way.
So a lot of the second one happens, but I mean, companies, it's more about they're very pragmatic and I want to comply with the rules and manage my risk and do the best I can do for the business. As I mentioned, the consumers, most of them, they don't care. On the government side, for both in Europe and the US, I think it's a matter primarily of national security. And I think it's an important matter to keep into account, like who's hosting your data, who knows what about your citizens and such. Most developing economies, they don't care about that. I mean, many people would argue that the operative system of most developing economies is WhatsApp, right? If you want, this is just an experimental thought. But if you wanted to do a coup in Latin America, what you need to do is hack their WhatsApp communication, and you can get people to convince people that someone is doing something that they shouldn't be doing, and without shooting a single bullet, you can potentially replace the entire government just by hacking their WhatsApp communication, because that's how they run. They run on top of WhatsApp. So that's just an example of the extent to which they don't care about who owns the data that the government runs in, and also the data of their people. And it's not that they are bad governments or so. I mean, there are many arguments for in favor of saying that they are terrible, but it's that they have so many other problems to cope with that data privacy is definitely not one of them. So I do believe that we are going to see some tools in especially related with AI that use data in developing economies that work in developing economies and work really well, but they will be impossible to use here in the US or in Europe because of how conscious the governments are about data risks.
Tim, I'm going to give you the last word before we head out to our lightning round.
Yeah, no, I think this is fascinating, kind of how you've been able to leverage AI and your perspective on kind of how to approach the overall sort of governance and regulation landscape. Like, would you say that people are kind of overcomplicating things when it comes to doing these AI apps? Like, can people do things in a simpler way, or what's your perspective on how people are approaching building these different AI apps?
So some people argue that 2025 is the year of the AI agents, right? And that is AI 2023, 2024, most of the AI applications was just giving a lot of data to an LLM model for the LLM model to answer questions, and that's it. The problem is that has a very limited, like, it might work for customer service, it might work for automated SDR calls, it might work for your business intelligence tool to capture some stuff. But most of the potential, I believe, on LLMs is going to actually be the creation of not copilots, but pilots, like full agents that do the work that a professional usually does on their career from beginning to end. And that requires A, way more data, and B, it requires flows. So it's not only about having the data, is building the flows of that data, building the methodologies for capturing that data, analyzing that data, keeping that data in memory, and then very intelligently identifying what's the data that you need to provide for the LLM to be able to bring that person to whatever is the next step on that flow that the person needs to go to. Thing is that that's significantly more difficult than simply creating a chatbot with LLM and some RAG. It does, in fact, out of all of the code we have in Torre, only 10% of the code or so has to do with LLM interactions. The other 90% is just data flows and organizing the data and capturing the data and caching the data to be able to do really fast queries and such. And none of that has to do with LLMs.
This is I'm glad we're closing out with this, because I think for people who are building these apps, a lot of discussions I have with folks is like, it's the other way around. They think 90% of the LLM is doing it, 10% little of that stuff. And I'm like, no, I like how you use the word flow. We need a lot of the data, but also understand the flow, which we're basically creating the state machine of how this stuff is going to, how we expect it to work. And there are cycles. You have to go back around these things, and then you have to figure out when should I keep going and go back and so forth. I mean, that's going to be part of the planning, but you give it the states. And I have the book over here. It is just good old fashioned planning of AI. Like, that stuff doesn't go away.
Yeah, I think you use a really good keyword, right? What the applications we've seen so far that use LLM are primarily stateless. But the reality of businesses is that they are stateful. And that's an order of magnitude more complex.
That is a great way. I love that closing here. All right, let's go to our lightning round questions. I got them here prepared. Let me kick it off. First question: Should companies be trying to build their own AI agents? or are they going to be buying them? Or
Well, the answer is not. It's not that. I'll try to make it short. So I think that they should not try to build it, nor they should try to license it. I think they should try to pay based on the performance of the AI agents that they hire. So SaaS, software as a service, which right now is mostly being monetized via a monthly subscription payment, is going to move into actually software as a service. And that is, I deliver a service to you. And if the service I deliver to you is successful, then you pay me a fee for that success. So I think that SaaS, the original SaaS, should be renamed software as a subscription. And now we are going to go into the real software as a service, the real SaaS.
honest, no BS take there. Love it.
Yeah.
Tim, you go.
All right, number 2, is AI making it easier or harder to govern our data?
Harder, definitely. And I'll answer why on, I think, the next question you have for me.
You can answer why real quick. Yeah.
What?
So my previous company, Bonnie Studio, a lot of audio work, a lot of voices and video. What's happening with those voices? What happens with how you use those voices to potentially train new AI models? And then what happens with the outcomes or the outputs, of those AI models? And who owns that data and how can that data be used? So who owns what and what can be used with that? It becomes significantly more difficult now with AI than before. When it stops being yours and up until what point now it becomes something else or someone else's.
All right, next question. So there's so many AI companies getting started, but I mean, obviously that's where the excitement and innovation is. When you are giving companies and founders advice, do you encourage them right now to lean into AI?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they have to.
But let me expand it. Is it really?
No, actually, when we have that question, the first thing I ask them is define AI. Right? Any AI conversation I start, you know that the Socratic method has 2 parts. One is question all ideas, but B, also agree on the definitions of the words that you're using, right? And define AI, right? Like, of course, today we have been talking about AI being LLMs, but for the most part, during the history of humankind, I mean, the last century, AI has been that technology that is so magical that is not yet part of our day-to-day, because as soon as it becomes part of our day-to-day, we stop calling it AI. Google was AI. The spreadsheet was AI, right? But we don't think about them being AI any longer.
Got it.
So sorry for the...
No. Again, this is
a good analogy.
I love it. Thank you.
When you said that, the first thing that came to mind is that, like, do you remember there was a period of time where we would keep on saying, like, oh, I go to Amazon.com. I go to .com, right? Now we don't ever say that, right? Oh, we go to Amazon. I go to Facebook, right?
Yeah. So they have to use AI? Yeah, they have to use new technology. Like you have to use all of the new technology available for you to be more competitive, because if you're not using that technology, your competitors and newcomers are going to use it and you're going to become obsolete.
100%. Tim, a final question.
All right, final lightning round. So I find it really interesting that you found a way to use governance to kind of create a better user experience and a more differentiated user experience. Do you think the opportunity to look at governance that way applies to any company, or do you think you were in kind of a unique situation?
I think that it doesn't apply to any company, but there are many companies to what that apply. I do believe that in the future, as users, we are going to have the same way that we have a few preferred apps in our phone. We are going to have a few preferred AI agents. And so instead of me interacting with 1,000 AI agents for each, let's say, insurance company, right, for my car, it's more likely that I'm going to have an AI agent that is my trustworthy insurance advisor, and he or she, that agent or it, is going to be the one interacting with all of the different insurance companies out there. So, and for that, you need some kind of layer of information that someone is going to have about you that historically no one had. It was fragmented into many different companies. But that AI agent needs to know a lot about you, and you're going to be happy that they know about you, because they might make better decisions, or at least suggest better decisions than the decisions that you will take yourself.
That's interesting. Quick bonus follow-on question. I know we're running out of time here, but quick bonus follow-on question is, that's interesting. You said there'd be a few agents that you would kind of see that would be your kind of preferred agents. Now, if all the consolidation happens, then that might be like, oh, I always go to OpenAI for everything, including recruiting, right? But like, what quickly, like, why is your belief that we're going to have some specialized agents as opposed to like everything being Google or whatever, right?
So I think that we are going to have something similar to what we experience with apps. So there are default apps in our phones, like Maps and your email and such like that. But there are many specialized apps, like LinkedIn is not, for example, or Indeed or any of the job boards are not part of the very big companies. Well, LinkedIn is part of Microsoft, right? But that happened relatively recently. So while I believe that the big winners of LLMs are going to be Siri, Apple with Siri, is Google with Gemini or OK Google, and Meta just because they have WhatsApp and such. I believe that there are going to be multiple sub agents that you're going to be interacting with for specific solutions. And it's very likely that we are going to end up seeing the same way that there is an app store for apps. Siri might end up having her own agent store, where she is the one helping you discover what agents you need to be interacting with, and then you start interacting with that agent through your phone.
That's exciting. I look forward to that.
All right, takeaway time. Tim, take us away with takeaways.
All right, Alexander, thank you so much for going through things today. We started off with your sort of initial foray into data, right? You mentioned the company that you started in 2007 around the voice actors and being able to match them together with these different opportunities, whether it's radio or video games or whatever. And you dealt with a scale issue there, right? Like they can't review 1,000 submissions. People can't submit 1,000 submissions. So data was the answer. You had to use data and use machine learning and AI to be able to match the right people to the right opportunities. And you really saw that the data was the driver of that. And that led you then to later starting that company around the creative asset kind of matchmaking and generation. And of course, now most recently, your company Torre.ai and working on Emma, the AI recruiter. And so all across all of these things, right, the keys have been the data. And I think that's one of the underlying keys and conclusions I feel like from this conversation is the importance of that underlying data, not just clever use of an AI model or something like that. It was the data that was the common thread across all three of those companies that really helped you to differentiate and create value. One of the things that we talked about with Torre is especially around governance, right? Like how are you managing governance as it comes to using AI and using data? And you mentioned that your experiences in the past really gave you foresight on how to manage governance better going forward in this company. That actually became a part of the differentiation and your unique value and a better user experience that you're providing. It's not something that slows you down. It's actually something that is creating a moat for you to be successful as you go forward. And I think that's a cool lens by which to think. I think for those listening, whether you're building AI or you're just working at some company, right, that's trying to grapple with, are we even AI ready and how do we use it, is thinking about governance as a way to create value, to create differentiation, to create innovation. You mentioned that originally when you were putting Torre together, you were thinking of taking kind of a decentralized approach, but what you realize is that the governance aspect is less about the individual's privacy, and it's more about the broader landscape around governance and regulation. And that allowed you to focus a little bit more on the user experience piece. So I think that's an interesting set of takeaways here. Juan, what were your big takeaways?
You had some more, but just a couple I want to pull up. We talk about data. Data is the gold that is difficult to commoditize. AI alone is not where the value is ultimately. That was an important takeaway. And then your practical advice here is, and this is one that I learned too the hard way. It's a great life advice. Is just set the right and real expectations. right? And I like what you said, like privacy doesn't always need to be by default. If you set the expectation is going to be open, then people already know that. And what you've learned on the contrary, they're open to not being private, right? And that opens up some transparency. That's in the situation that you have. So setting the right expectations for that is really important. But we talked a lot about the geopolitical aspects around that, people worthy to listen to. But finally, I want to close with the biggest opportunity in AI. You're very explicit saying it's not just the co-pilots, it's the pilots. You need a lot of data, but you also need the flows, those workflows, those states. And I think today, a lot of the focus is on stateless stuff that we're doing with LLMs. And we'll be having to have this shift into having something being very stateful, which is what we need. What did we do? Anything we missed? I mean, there's a lot we missed, but that's our summary.
That was much better than any AI I've seen.
All right. We close up very quickly because you all need to go work and get our meetings. Quickly, what's your advice? Who should we invite next, and what resources do you follow?
My advice, no, well, what I shared today, some practical tips. Who should you invite? It might be interesting. I'm going to pitch my wife, Tania Zapata, co-founder and the CEO of Bonnie Studio. A lot of data and AI stuff related to creative work, which she's definitely on the leading edge of what's happening on that regard and how to think about data governance and many other things. And what resources I follow? Strategy, and I read that newsletter every single day. And I also read Hacker News. Those are my two sources of daily information.
Perfect. Alexander, thank you so much. This was a fantastic conversation, which honestly got us out of our normals of just our same kind of same old, which is not, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. So thank you for helping us get out and just get different perspectives.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Look forward to another drink in the future.
Cheers.
Cheers. Salud.
Salud.
See ya.